Thank you.
Mr. Speaker.
I call the Honourable Member Chris Okenwald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've listened to the speeches that have been given on this bill with considerable interest, and I'd like to compliment the previous Speaker and the member for Te Tai Tonga for the careful observations they have made without actually going through the committee process, because you're smack on the button. It was a very prolonged process for this particular bill. Well, I wouldn't know about that, you know. Take what you can, and when you get it, I guess, Mr. Mallard, thank you. But I guess I would take a measure of responsibility for the time that's been taken over the bill, because I think I was probably one of the most concerned people of all on the committee with regard to setting precedents, and I was very, very concerned about that. And it's nice to hear that people recognise that Stewart Island is, people have said, unique and a little bit different. I think the important thing that needs to be remembered about this, though, is that this is not a complete answer for what I term the Kaikoura syndrome of a very small rate base with large demands for infrastructure. This is designed entirely to help them with the infrastructure that services tourism. And when I felt this was coming our way, my wife and I went down in the winter and visited Stewart Island. Great little aeroplane took us across, and the pilot said, if you get scared, just be like me, shut your eyes before you land. And it was a wonderful experience, But I did indeed go to Uvia, is that the right pronunciation? Island. And I saw 11 species of birds that I haven't seen on Alva Island, that I haven't seen in my usual residence in Lake Runner. So it was good, and I enjoyed the whole thing. But I rise to support the bill, and enthusiastically so. And we did have a large throughput of people on this committee who've all had experience with this particular bill. I think we had 18, which is exceptional. But we did have a pretty good collegiate structure, and I'd particularly like to thank the people who led for Labour and for Greens, and in fact every party made a good contribution, and I'd like to thank too my Deputy Chair for that period, Nikki Wagner, because we all got really involved in this. We felt it was a deserving bill, and we wanted to do it properly. And it stretches back to 1994. A speech wouldn't be complete, Mr. Speaker, without recognising the efforts of the local member, Eric Roy. Goodness me, he really has worked on this. A very good member, I would agree with you there, from the other side of the House. Exceptionally good. There you are, I've said it 3 times, so you needn't expect to be said much more in the speech. But I'd like to acknowledge also the work of the Department of Internal Affairs and the Southland District Council, because we largely identified potential problems and referred them to the department and referred them to the council, and on some occasions we asked that they work together without it being through the committee, so that they could get their definitions right. And definitions were one of the major concerns that we had. Because you would wonder, looking at it, 16 submissions, only 1 against, why did it take so long? But it was this matter of defining exactly what was required. Purposes of the bill, just to go through it, that's actually been well gone into already, and I think it's a noble purpose, and once passed will be of great benefit to the people of Stewart Island or to the council, as long as people don't think, oh well, that's that fixed. It ain't going to be a lot of money for an infrastructure of that sort. And let's remember, if you want to go out at night, you take a torch, because street lights aren't there. And you're stepping back in history. I was reminded very much of my time in Hokihenga when I went down to Stewart Island. So there are things, I think, that need to be carefully considered before people think it's a catch-all. But it will improve both the opportunities for tourism on the island and reduce the pressure that tourism currently places on the island's infrastructure. I've heard an awful lot of figures, Mr. Speaker, for the number of people who actually live there. I refer again to the member for the district, because it's 429. How can it be roughly? Okay, 429 approximately. Okay, thank you. 19 cruise ships go there over an annual basis. That's an awful lot of people. Now, when it came to the committee, as I say, this was a bill with a good purpose, Mr. Speaker, and I think we have significantly improved the wording of the bill and the way the visitor levy will be administered. And again, I would like to acknowledge the work of the officials, because they came up with some excellent reasoning, some really good consideration and some good solutions. We have in fact been quite ruthless with the original text. I'm not sure that we've had another bill go through the committee which has been quite so exercised in surgery. But we have now a bill which better reflects the original intent. And I'd like to just touch on some of the changes that we made and describe why we thought they were necessary. One of the most significant changes to the purpose clause was to change from a charge being levied on travellers to and from Stewart Island, which was a fairly simplistic approach initially, to a charge levied only on those travelling to the island. We believe this better reflects the intent of the bill, that the levy be charged only on visitors to the island rather than any person travelling between Stewart Island and South Island. In addition, we expanded the purpose to set out exactly why the bill is required by adding the phrase, in order to better provide services, facilities and amenities for those persons while they're on the island. In other words, they should be able to see what they get. It's a bit like paying your parking fee for your boat trailer at Lake Brunner. Try parking somewhere else where you don't have to pay. It's going to be very awkward. So there are benefits attached to it, and we hope that benefits will pertain to this as well, and that people will see the benefits. The changes to interpretations of various terms are fairly standard in line with other changes to the bill. I'd like to point out, Mr. Speaker, though, that we've much more clearly defined what a visitor is for the purposes of this bill. And I'd commend anyone to have a look on the Empowering Bill papers just to see how carefully crafted the visitor definition is. Rather than including every traveller to and from the island and leaving it to the Council to define exceptions, which was, I think, one of the Council's initial requests, we felt that was heading for trouble. So the bill now clearly defines a visitor as someone who's not a ratepayer, not a resident, and not staying for longer than 21 days, amongst other provisions. We felt it was important to make these definitions clear in the bill to ensure the intentions of Parliament in passing this bill will be clearly reflected in its outcomes. As with other changes, Clause 5 brings the wording of the bill more clearly into line with its overall purpose and clarifies the rights and responsibilities of the Southland District Council. Notable change is the obligation on the Council to erect and maintain signs advising visitors of their obligations, the rate of the levy, how it's to be paid, and the offence for a breach of a bylaw. A number of speakers have commented on the careful drafting of this bill, and I too would like to commend those who drafted it, because it's not one that leaves too many loopholes or misunderstandings. So I think, Mr. Speaker, it's about as thoroughly done as it could be done, and that's why I have confidence that it will apply to Stewart Island quite adequately and quite appropriately. And I'm not sure I agree with those who say, well, this could be transferred to other islands or to other communities, because...
What about the Chathams?
Well, I wouldn't deny the Chathams, but I think they have a different problem.
No, they also have the same. They have lots of visitors.
I'm sure their representation is not a problem, Mr. Carter. Indeed, we heard my colleague, Mr. Finlayson, just saying how good the representation is.
That's right.
He did, and I wouldn't argue with him. Yes, that's right. I wouldn't argue with him. But no, I'm afraid I don't see a direct analogy between Stewart Island and other islands or the West Coast, which I'm very, very dearly married to. But this is purely for Stewart Island, and it will work. Mr. Speaker, Stewart Island is a beautiful place and well worth visiting. For the fewer than 430 people who live there, however, it is their home. For too long, those ratepayers have been effectively subsidising the services enjoyed by those of us who visit, and we owe it to them to support this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the Honourable Member Andrew William.